And to help us further dissect the interest rate hike, we're now joined by Bright Pasha from Bright Planning. Bright, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and a warm welcome to Prime News on 3.
Super. Thanks for having me once again.
And it does appear that consumers are now at a wit's end, as there seemingly is no end in sight, for the growing woes for both the government and the consumer. So what does the recent, interest rate hike mean for consumer debt?
We spoke about this initially in the first quarter, and it was predicted for the next meetings, the next three meetings, that the interest rate definitely will be increased. And at the end of the day, the main thing here is inflation. And what that translates to the ordinary man in the street is that basically cost of living is a problem. It's not just a South African problem, it's actually a global problem. And what effectively has been done by the Reserve Bank is a consistent sort of aggressive move towards battling inflation that is basically a worldwide, strategy.
Now, the fluctuations in the interest rate. Say, for instance, I'm investing in interest-bearing investments like money market funds, cash or fixed deposits, and even bonds. What would that mean, though? Would that mean that falling interest rates would be to my detriment or to my advantage? Say if I've got a financial windfall from somewhere else, and I want to invest my money in those asset classes. So do I just put my money in those asset classes and hope for the best?
To begin with, if you are in that position, you should consider yourself quite lucky and fortunate because, indeed, if you do have some disposable money that you can put into such investment vehicles, you'll be actually benefiting. You are more welcoming this decision because you'll be able to get a higher return. Versus on the other end, if you're not saving, you're perhaps borrowing. So for those that are borrowing, their debt has become literally just expensive by simply by this adjustment. And obviously it just shows that once again, when we're looking at inflation, we're talking about consumption, we're talking about our cost of living. And it's unfortunate that a lot of South Africans live based on debt, and this is quite detrimental. And once again, this is a strategy which the South African Reserve Bank is looking to combat inflation by helping us to come out of the worst, which I would argue that the West is quite behind right now. And therefore, if everything's said and done, we are looking towards, achieving the GDP goals that we desire. And that's going to help us to, effectively have a better future at the end of the day, but with some little bit of pain right now.
Was it the only option at the disposal of the Reserve Bank that they hike the repo rate yet again? I mean, were there no other options that would probably and possibly cushion consumers against the adverse effects of inflation?
You see, there is always different solutions, but once again, they are remaining consistent. Once again, they're combating inflation. They're being consistent with global trends. Today was quite an eventful day in terms of interest rates. In the UK, they also increased. However, people were hoping they would go also by 75 basis points, but they opted for 50, which is more sort of a sort of less aggressive. The tone was set by the US. They went for 75 basis. And once again, South Africa has joined the crowd in terms of going for 75 basis point. And this is very important in order to help the economy grow, as we can see already with the rand already starting to perform better against the dollar, which could help with some international markets in terms of South Africa's interest. But at the end of the day, from the South African Reserve Bank's point of view, they are doing the best that's possible. However, South Africans and consumers must put themselves in a better position by relying less on debt, making sure they have additional incomes, and really taking charge of their financial futures. That is really the best thing. Everybody needs to play their part, and let's survive this moment.
And should a consumer want to take up debt, maybe to finance a property investment, or maybe to buy to buy a vehicle, I suppose then they need to know the distinction between the repo rate and the prime interest rate, because the end result of this move was that perhaps if you have a floating interest rate, for instance, I mean, the rand amount of your monthly repayment would have been much lower because the interest portion would have been much, much lower, ultimately putting more, disposable income back into the pocket of the consumer, and something that came, of great assistance, especially those whose income had been reduced as a result of the pandemic. So what do you make of that? What are your thoughts? What are your reflections about this?
Well, initially, people, when they have disposable income, they tend to spend it rather than save it. So that's already a problem. And once again, it just justifies why inflation is the more important thing to take care. But also, when you are considering to take up debt to buy an asset, whether it's a vehicle or a house, what I tend to tell my clients is it's better to actually get an asset that's going to generate economic benefits, where it's going to help you to generate your current income in a better sense or in a more efficient manner, or it's going to help you to create an additional income. Then that's the type of debt you should be acquiring, rather than the debt that's for lifestyle purposes, that's really just not going to benefit your life in any way, but just cause more outflows. That's the type of debt that should be avoided totally. In terms of the timing of the market, that's a very difficult thing, because at the end of the day, we're looking at a needs basis. All of these things, it's based on people's needs. And unfortunately, if you need a house today, you're going to buy that house whether you are, the repo rate is high or not. So that's the fundamental problem. We are dealing with everything based on a needs basis, not necessarily on taking advantage on interest rates or whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, it's all about affordability and what you as an individual can do for yourself.
All right, Bright, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
you. That is Bright Pashe, business accountant from Bright Planning, and analyzing the interest rate hike earlier on today.